I stay overnight at Balladonia in one of their cabins to dry my gear and meet Peter, staying next door. We decide to ride the last 200 kilometres of the Nullarbor to Norseman together. Peter had rode his BMW GS650 from Rockhampton in Queensland and was fulfilling a lifelong goal in his 70th year. He rode with an open-face helmet and no gloves, which would have made things interesting when we got a bit of rain up the road. He told me, "I once worked with a guy in the government. He was just about to retire, and all he could talk about was his $500,000 super fund. He was dead within 4 months of retiring. I didn't want that to happen to me, so I want to do things while I still can." We travel through the Great Western Woodlands, the largest remaining area of intact Mediterranean climate woodland in the world. It covers an area the size of England, 16 million hectares. It is so great to learn about and see these unique parts of my own country. I previously had no idea about this place. I decide to head to Kalgoorlie in order to get a new rear tyre fitted. Kalgoorlie was a place that had fascinated me. I'd heard it was a rough and ready mining town with 50 pubs and barmaids called skimpies that get around in little more than their underwear. I'd also heard about Hay Street, the red light district, which used to host 18 working brothels. What I found was a town whose glory days were long behind it. Yes, the buildings were magnificent, the pubs huge museums to Australia's drinking culture, ornately fitted with chandeliers and statues of sirens riding dolphins, but many of the grand old buildings were in disrepair, and even those with a fresh coat of paint were no longer serving their original purpose, a pet meat supply with a pressed tin roof being a fine example. And the infamous Hay Street now only had 2 brothels, and one only surviving by opening its doors to tourists, giving them an insight into the salacious business of prostitution. I took the tour guided by Carmel, a madam of 24 years, with the most ridiculous posh English accent I'd ever heard. Butter wouldn't melt in sweet Carmel's mouth. Somehow she innocently ended up transported to a mining town brothel after her doctor suggested she needed a hobby. She went on to tell us that because Kalgoorlie was a family town, the working girls were not allowed to frequent the town without an escort, pardon the pun, and couldn't date local men or buy local houses. This containment helped keep the business, and let's face it, prostitution is business, confined to the Hay Street area, and in that way controlled. This kept prices high, and we were told of women in the 1960s earning enough to be able to buy a house every single month. We heard stories of girls taking 70 clients a day, but alas, she said, most girls wasted their limited working life on cheap jewellery, expensive clothes, and overseas holidays. She said now all a working girl needed was a mobile phone and an ad in a newspaper. My first meal in this remote gold mining town kind of took me by surprise. It was damn good. A blue swimmer crab linguine with chilli, garlic fennel and tomato sugo, washed down with a gingerbread ale, a zesty summer ale with fresh ginger added to the mash. I met Beck, who drove a truck in the super pit. I rudely asked her how much she earned, hearing tales of the big dollars the mining industry offered. About 100,000, she told me, with about 30,000 going to the tax man. Beck told me the mine preferred employing females to drive the trucks as they were gentler on the machinery. They even had hours set up that allowed mums to collect their kids from school. I silently smiled to myself and thought, 20 years ago, women earned their money in Kalgoorlie on their backs. Now, they earn it sitting on their bums.